I have stated that the poor people of Africa cannot manage Europe or America's waste. If we all belong to a global community, then why will any government sit down and watch this hazardous waste being transported or exported to a poor country like Africa? For me, I see it as a deliberate attempt by the West to dump obsolete technology and hazardous materials on Africa because they think that the solution in their respective countries are more expensive and it's cheaper to bring it down here to Africa. And so I get really angry because if e-waste is hazardous waste, then somebody must pay for its management. And if you're not ready to pay and rather dump it on somebody else, then you are not being fair. I mean, you can guess by just mere looking at it that about 70% of the people who are impacted by these e-waste activities are women and children. They are in the majority of people who come here. Some really have nothing to do with the e-waste, but we must begin to think more carefully so that one day another generation will not rise up and say it is the West that have killed developing countries. Situations like this must not be allowed to continue.
This is ÄNAKYKЛΩΣΗ, a scrapyard in Accra, Ghana. Alongside Chernobyl, it is ranked as one of the most toxic places on the planet. The dismantling of electronic waste, or e-waste, is done by men, women, and even children. They work to extract valuable materials from items we discard. It is a toxic and harmful process, both to the people and to the environment. But the rate of production and disposal of electronic items is increasing every year, and more of these unregulated sites are appearing all across the world. They are the face of our growing e-waste crisis.
Ghana has huge import of second-hand electronics. And the last studies that was carried out indicated that 70% of all imports of electronic and electrical appliances are second-hand. So already that is huge. And even within the 70%, 20%, almost 20% is coming as complete junk. And these ones go to the dump sites or the scrapyard at ÄNAKYKЛÅΣΗ, where they are taken through environmentally hazardous means to retrieve precious metals. Added to this is lack of employment for our youth. And so because there are precious metals that they can actually sell and make some money out of it, a lot of young people go into this hazardous business just to make income for themselves. And so these are the multiple facets of problems that we have with electronic waste in general, not only in Accra, but in Ghana as a whole.
Yeah, I started the job with burning and dismantling. I was 17 to 18. The electronic is coming from the towns. We get it from some of the companies, houses and fitting shop. When they brought it from Europe, they will select the one is good and sell. The one is no good, they'll sell, give us for scraps. So when you brought it here, you will dismantle it and remove the copper and then the wires, and aluminum, the rest, you will burn it.
We are a group of scrap dealers that have come together to form an association. We are called the Greater Accra Scrap Dealers Association. In our scrap yard, we deal in scrap metals, which is the copper, aluminum, and the other stuff. Automobile vehicles, big machineries from factories, computer parts, electronics like radio sets, televisions, and all other aspects of metallic objects. We are interested in all that, yes.
If someone had said to me 10 years ago, right, you'll have a laptop which does internet, phone, you can watch films on it, you'll have a phone which does all of that stuff as well, but you can make phone calls, and then that won't be quite enough, so you'll need something that fits in between those, so you'll need a tablet that does most of all of those things. I wouldn't have believed them. But we've got increasing IT, and that's happening in the developing world as well.
Take the cell phone. In 2011, almost 500 million were made. 2 years later, that number had doubled to 1 billion. Today, there are more operational cell phones on the planet than people. But eventually, all cell phones break. In 2014, we produced 42 million tons of e-waste globally. That's about 400 of the world's largest aircraft carriers, or 115 Empire State Buildings, or 7 times the weight of the Great Pyramid at Giza.
There are two problems with the disposal. The first one is that we're generating too much of it because we throw things away. And also the other problem is when we get to the end of life, these things have inherent hazards in them. If they're normally recycled in the standards we would expect, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's protection of human health and the environment. If, however, they end up in a country or a place where there's not those controls, then we can have real issues with what people can be exposed to when they're not looking after them in a sound manner.
It's a really nasty business. The things are designed, for example, not to burn. They have flame retardants in them. They have all sorts of chemical additives in there, which are functional. They do a job, both in the manufacturing process and when you're using it. But when you start taking it apart, when you start to burn it, for example, trying to get to melt the copper out or the gold, when you try and treat it with acids to try and leach out some of the materials you may want to gain, that's really bad news because you have no control over what's being released. It could be released as a smoke, it could be released as something in the acid, which then goes into the ground.
The problem of this thing is just only the smoking. When you breathe it, evening time, you are not feeling well, you no go fit sleep, and it get fever again. When you breathe the smoke, at least your chest, when you cough, it will be black.
Well, I have an interest in seeing how the environment and environmental change and human health all interact. My background being in toxicology for testing for new compounds.
The team of Eli Film wanted to do an independent study to test if there is chemical contamination related to electronic waste dumping and processing in Ekbublushi. As part of the study, I worked with Samson Otiemo at the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Samson is a former school teacher and currently a researcher at the Commission, which is a governmental research station.
I was teaching in a secondary school when one time we had a letter from a Dutch company that I wouldn't want to mention the name, that they wanted to donate computers and other accessories to my school to support IT education. And we were so happy because we needed these electronic equipment at that time. They paid for the full cost, 2 40-foot containers from Netherlands right down to my hometown, Ekropon, where I was teaching. When we were testing the computers before distribution, we noticed about 80% of them were not working. And we were surprised because how would the company pay all this money, send this junk equipment to us? That time I hadn't heard of e-waste, I didn't know what it was. So I spoke to other teachers from different secondary schools. And unfortunately, they also have the same sad story. In one case, none of the computers was working. But I just went onto the net and said, dumping useless computers to Africa, and I found so many information on e-waste, and that really pushed me into this e-waste research.
So these black areas used to be burning areas?
Yes, it used to be burning areas.
But you see, what I'm wondering is there's pockets of people manually...
Disassembling.
Yes.
These guys dismantle anything. Just bring it and they'll dismantle it for you. You can bring the latest Ferrari and they'll dismantle it. So this is typical e-waste dismantling activity going on. Okay. You can see they've dismantled almost everything. And these guys who do the dismantling, they have the highest injury rate. Yeah, they have the highest injury rate. I mean, look at this guy hammering the compressor. Any slip of the hammer can result in fatal injury.
Why is he... that shouldn't be open, should it?
Gas will gas in him. What he's doing is potentially dangerous. That is why the colleagues are protesting.
You never do that.
It could be an LPG gas, or it could be... And you know, there's fire here.
I think what's surprising when you open up a mobile phone and you look at the circuit board through even a low-powered microscope is how tiny some of these components are. And because we demand more and more power and we demand smaller and smaller devices, the components themselves are getting to a really minuscule scale. Capacitors and resistors now are less than 1/3 of a millimeter across. So you're talking about getting close to the width of a human hair for some dimensions of some of these components. So this is a pretty old phone. This is relatively easy to take apart to a certain level, and then it gets tricky. So I've taken those screws out, but now what? Okay. Then we've got the electronics. You can see how they've started to corrode a little bit in this really old phone. Then the circuit board. You find in mobile phones there's a lot of shielding because there's a lot of obviously transmission of radiation as the thing transmits. This little motor is the thing that makes your phone vibrate, and this little weight at the top is actually made of a tungsten alloy because it's so heavy. Here we go. So that's some more of the circuit board, and under here, if we can get it off, is the gold. So wherever there are buttons, there's usually gold. And that's why smartphones are a little bit cheaper to make to some extent because they don't use all this gold as the contacts, because they simply don't have a keyboard and buttons. From this design, there's clearly been not much thought given to how you get the recyclable materials out of here, how you get the valuable materials out, maybe even how you get the toxic materials out. They're just too integrated with the design. Just common sense tells you that this is all rather difficult and probably not worth doing. If you're a recycler, you just want to throw this straight in a big recycling furnace maybe and just get the precious metals back. Current recycling technology is limited. We can only retrieve some of the elements that we put into the waste stream in the first place. In e-waste, it's typically less than half the elements. The rest of them are never fully recovered. And so we are basically consuming and throwing away some of these very precious materials. So you have a range of materials which are regarded, particularly in the EU, as toxic materials. Lead is one which most people would have heard of, but there are also cadmium, arsenic, which people are aware of as a poison, mercury, and there are others as well which can be detrimental to health. So as long as we control the amount that's released to the environment, and we do it in a well-controlled and environmentally friendly way, then we can deal with these elements which are, harmful to human health. But if you do it in an uncontrolled way, and if you release it to the environment, if it gets into the soil or into the air, then that can cause a problem.
They are burning those wires to get copper out and then sell them. We have to go a bit that way as well.
Yeah.
Into the smoke.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes, promise.
Sure.
So in terms of the main chemicals that we tried to look at, we focused on heavy metals, and the 5 ones that we selected were lead, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, and mercury, which one way or the other have been reported to cause problems to humans.
Oh my God, this is ugly.
You go, you take deep shower with plenty of soap. Akela, this should go down as one of the most difficult sampling you have ever done. Try to avoid as much trash as possible. There we
As soon as we collected the soil samples, we took them to the commission to air dry them so that all moisture goes away. We then sieved each soil sample into finer powder to get rid of little pieces of plastic or grass or whatever, and then weighed each sample to know how much we are using in the next step. The next step was to add acids to the soil to perform a reaction that is called acid digestion. This reaction allows the heavy metals to come out into solution, and then we can take those solutions to use at the final stage of the process, which is analysis and data collection. So we take those solutions, feed them into a detector, which in our case was an atomic absorption spectroscope, and then detect the concentration of heavy metals per gram. This is how we determined the levels of the 5 heavy metals we chose.
What was shocking, I suppose the hypothesis of our testing was that we will find contamination, but I did not expect to find contamination in that small sample size, and also in the disused areas, in the areas that are not directly involved with electronic waste. In order to make a very clear causal relationship between each heavy metal or each chemical towards a health problem, it takes a long time, and that's the whole field of toxicology. But you can take an idea, I think, from our study and supported by other studies as well, because ours is consistent with those results, to understand that there is something going on there.
Anytime I return from Agbogbloshie, I don't enter my house with anything I put on to Agbogbloshie. I more or less remove everything naked and walk straight to the bathroom. So that I don't touch anything in the house. I go straight to the bathroom, get myself washed down, and then make sure I put on protective clothing, soak my clothing for about 3 days before putting them in the washing machine, so that I don't cross-contaminate anybody in my house. Because I'm worried about the huge pollution at the site.
The problems associated with toxic materials are not new to us. There are international treaties that aim to control their transport, use, and disposal. As e-waste contains toxic materials, it is classified as hazardous. The main treaty covering hazardous substances is called the Basel Convention.
I'm Jim Puckett. I'm the founder and director of the Basel Action Network. The Basel Action Network gets its crazy name from a United Nations Convention about trying to help developing countries protect themselves from hazardous waste dumping by rich, developed countries. It was unique in that it's an environmental treaty which was driven and basically authored by developing countries, and extremely important that it gets ratified, particularly by the countries that it needs to apply to the most, the highest waste-producing countries. And the United States per capita produces the most waste of any country in the world. over 170 parties. All of the European Union, Australia, Canada, Japan, etc., are all parties to it, but the United States refuses to ratify it. And there's only 2 countries in the world that signed it in Basel, Switzerland, when it was first adopted, that never ratified it, and that's Haiti and the United States. Once something is exported from the United States and is on its way on a boat to China, as soon as it gets out of our territorial waters, it becomes criminal traffic.
Okay, it's Tuesday, June 23rd, 2015 at 11:22 in the morning, in Paramount, California. We have a CRT monitor going to Atan Recycling Corporation at 13941 Norton Avenue, Unit D in Chino, California. So with every item, I will disable it somehow so it's not usable. And pull the main power. So now this monitor is no good. We want it to be waste. We don't want it to be reusable, so that we can state down the road that yes, this item was a waste product. And if the recycler says, "Oh no, we sent it for reuse. We tested it," it's like I have footage of me destroying the monitor.
Reliable data on the international trade in waste is very poor and cannot be relied upon because we're not collecting data for those waste streams. So what you have to do if you really want real information about waste trade is you have to get your hands dirty. You have to get out there. You have to follow the containers that leave recyclers and disappear. You need to have people in the ports, like in Tema Port in Accra, Ghana. You need people in Hong Kong. See the stuff coming in, follow it where it goes. You need to also think about using tracking devices. This is something we're starting to do now. This is what you have to do to really find out what's going on.
Okay, so it should be this line of equipment here. Well, not in that order, but sure. Yeah, grab the tags and we can check the numbers. So that's the order you're going to do them in. And just let me show you Atan Recycling. You're probably going to see a sea container right here. Keep driving right to the end. You're going to look to your left, and what you're going to see is this here, just full of e-waste. Gaylords everywhere like that, and probably a sea container here because they got a forklift ramp.
Hello. I was told to come in here. It didn't say it on the storage and needed to get rid of it.
Did they give it a book? Oh, it's for your professional use?
Yeah.
What do you know
I
of?
don't need to get rid of it.
Huh?
I just needed to get rid of it, recycle it.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So we have now deployed about 200 trackers, and we're following them all over the earth now. So I'll show you a little more. When we go to the map function, this is the one that went from Michigan, as you can see. It went ... across the country on a train and sent out of Long Beach, California, went to a port in China, and then went down to an area in China which is really remote, really rural. And if we zoom in on that, you see a blotch of points, which means every 24 hours it was reporting. If we take that into the satellite map, you can see that all of this is in a farm scrapyard in the middle of a farming community in China.
Out of the Basel Action Network's 200 trackers, 62 went abroad to developing countries. But there was one country missing from the list of destinations.
It's a big mistake to presume that Ghana is the extent of the problem. Ghana is easily accessible. You get off an airplane with your camera, you go there in 20 minutes, you can look at it. That's why it's getting featured so much, but don't think for a minute it's the only place it's happening on Earth. We know for a fact that it's far larger amounts of being dealt with similarly in China, India, Pakistan, other countries in Africa, etc. So it is a widespread problem. It's an economic-driven problem, so it isn't going to be confined just to Ghana.
The Basel Action Network trackers revealed that broken CRT monitors left with Atan Recycling had been exported to Taiwan. Under Taiwanese law, it is illegal to import broken electronics.
We may not have managed to test for everything, but the 5 elements we did, they are known to have negative health outcomes, particularly lead and mercury. The routes by which those heavy metals can reach humans are multiple, so it can be harmful to inhale, to ingest, to have skin contact, and it's very harmful to any woman-bearing children because heavy metals can affect the development of embryos. As soon as we got our results, I showed them to Dr. Tony Fletcher, who is an epidemiologist working between Public Health England and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where I also work.
My particular focus over the last few years has been on chemical exposures, particularly in contaminated land and drinking water. But I heard specifically about ηνικοτή from Markella when she showed me these alarming results of soil contamination there. It's very worrying because they are vulnerable individuals and they are not informed about the potential hazards. I mean, they don't smell, they're not gonna, you don't perceive these metals as being something that you taste or anything. The levels of exposure here, it's enough to lead to chronic risks to health without you perceiving it's happening to you. You've got 2 different sorts of risks involved here mainly. There's neurological damage, risk to your brain, to your nervous system, particularly strongly from lead and mercury, which are among the contaminants. And then there's the risk of cancer, which you get from arsenic, from chromium, and from cadmium.
The 5 elements that were tested are all known to cause human health problems. They include cancer, respiratory problems, developmental defects, and neurotoxicity. The concentration of these elements in ΗΛΕΚΤΡΙΚΕΣ was sometimes over 100 times higher than the soil outside the site.
We don't feel good looking at their condition economically, looking at their condition of health, because most of the things that we do here negatively, first of all, it comes to us, we start getting the negative effect before it even exposed to other people. Therefore, we are not happy about what is going on. It looks as if our situation is like you have a daughter that is dying, you don't have money to take your daughter to the hospital. So you just be confused and you don't know what to do. That is the situation in which we find ourselves.
But nobody gets health screened in any way here?
Once a while, the Ministry of Health comes in and does it, but it's purely voluntary.
Purely voluntary?
Yeah, purely voluntary.
And what do you know what they do? Like, do they take samples?
They take their sample, they check for their vital stats, blood pressure, sugar level. But
they don't test?
We don't have a national toxicology laboratory. We don't have national toxicology laboratory.
So people who might get ill here, though, will they go to that hospital? Or
well,
no,
they might go to, there's a clinic nearby where they will go. But again, because we don't have, and these people also, I mean from the lower ebb of the poverty, like may not have the financial resources to do the kind of tests that will help to identify their illness. So maybe if they complain of headache or vomiting, which are all symptoms of poisoning, the doctor may treat them for malaria, which is quite prevalent in Ghana. And so the person may end up dying, because the problem may not be malaria problem, it could be poisoning.
Tomorrow is another day.
Ghana seems to have a special relationship. A lot of the people involved are expats from the UK or from the whole former colonial relationship. So a lot of the material is flowing from the UK and to a lesser degree from mainland Europe, Netherlands, Germany. But Ghana doesn't seem to get a whole lot from the US, at least according to our current tracking.
Because the USA has not ratified the Basel Convention, its companies can export e-waste without breaking federal law. In the European Union, which has ratified the convention and implemented several other agreements, only working electronics can be exported to developing nations. Despite this, the export of e-waste still happens.
When my boss bring them from the maybe UK, comes straight to the port, my general manager has to do the processing with the paper, these things. After, then they'll bring them to our various shops. So we just offload them to the warehouse before we bring them to the shops. Sometimes, not all. Maybe if it's about 50, we'll get about 40 of them working, and some will be just we have to check them. So that place will be my duty to road check and then repair them. They all come from the UK, yeah.
No one knows how big the extent of the criminality is because they don't fill in returns to say, I've just engaged in 10,000 tonnes of illegal activity or whatever it might be. We believe there's something in the region of about 100,000 tonnes of waste that's illegally exported, waste electricals that are illegally exported each year from England. The people we're targeting are criminals, and they're doing it for money. And there's a whole range of people involved in the criminal activity, from those people that think it's a fast way to make money, through to people that are seriously organised in terms of funding other criminal activities. We have got a good industry in this country and in Europe for recovering electronic waste and turning it into valuable materials. Unfortunately, some people take the money pretending that they're going to recover the material, and then they might masquerade it as other goods and send it to a place in the world where it is cheaper to dispose of, which is illegal.
To put this to the test, eLife deployed 4 trackers hidden in broken CRT monitors. They were disabled by an independent electrician. Four drop-off locations were established around London. Of those 4, 3 CRTs were taken to recycling centers and scrapped according to regulations. The 4th, however, traveled elsewhere.
How are you doing?
Yeah, no.
I just want it recycled. It's broken.
Yeah, good man.
Yeah?
All right. 50p. You don't need that. Do you?
I'll let you have it. It's broken though.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Within a month, it had arrived in Tema Port Accra and then was transported to the La Paz district, a location known as a marketplace for used European goods.
River, UK. UK, oh wow. I see. Okay. That's it.
2 of the eLife team found the CRT on sale outside a second-hand goods shop.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I've seen the tracker. You can see the tracker. Yeah, that's obviously.
It was sold to them for $15 US. and it was still broken.
Not everything that gets diverted off for reuse still works, and this is where the problem comes in. In this country, we're absolutely rubbish at repairing. Hardly anyone gets anything electronic repaired, whereas if we go to those other countries, the repair's quite easy. So there's no waste and not waste, that's purely our slant on it. It's perfectly legal and environmentally and socially wise to reuse computers and any other electricals as much as possible. So in parts of Africa, for example, 80 to 90% of the population can't afford new. So if we're going to hit Millennium Development Goals, if we're going to have IT involved in any development, we need people to be able to buy these goods, and they can't buy new.
I think because the electronic products that are coming as second-hand, we have a perception in Ghana that those ones are quality than the brand new equipment. And sometimes it is true. Most of the electronic gadgets that come from the Asian region are mostly substandard. And so they bring that quite easily. And so people tend to buy second-hand more.
Whether exported legally or illegally, one issue that cannot be denied is that at some point all electronics will become waste. When this happens in developing countries, the lack of recycling infrastructure means e-waste cannot be disposed of safely. As it cannot be shipped elsewhere, it ends up on sites like ΑΝΑΚΥΚΛΩΣΗ.
In Ghana here, we have some people who goes around, buy them as scraps, they two-pieces them. So we don't know what they use it to do, but they will buy it from us at a cheaper rate, and then they take it away. Normally they come to the warehouse, because when we checked and it's faulty and we can't do nothing about it, we just put them somewhere. When they come, then we just give it to them. We can't just leave them in our garbage, like we can't send them to the refuse site. Definitely they also go there to pick them out. So it's important they come around and then take them away. There's no other way, unless the scrap dealers come around to take those things. Yeah.
I think producers of electronic equipment must be responsible for what they produce. I mean, there's no justification to find Dell keyboard lying in ANAKYKЛΩΣΗ. When we are talking about circular economy in UK, there is absolutely no justification. Why is it that Dell, HP, Toshiba, etc. in UK and in Europe and in America, they are responsible for the end of life of their products, but when it comes to Africa, we leave it for our poor young men to dismantle and poison themselves and everybody else? I mean, I feel so bad to see these multinational companies and their motherboards and their keyboards lying around ANAKYKЛΩΣΗ. This problem in ANAKYKЛΩΣΗ didn't start yesterday. At least it's been running for almost 10 years now. Why is there no concrete action by the producers to try and also solve this problem?
Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats and silence your devices.
Welcome to the future. The millions of decisions, big and small. The countless realizations of new ideas. The immeasurable number of choices that all happened in this moment will shape the world as we know it tomorrow and for years to come. New technologies are giving us the power to not only navigate the chaos, but to define the future ourselves.
It's really been interesting to watch the global focus now, both on climate change, but also on materials. And how much do we have and how much do we need? So if everyone consumed at the rate Americans do today, it would take 5 Earths to supply the materials for that. We don't have fibers, and it's not going to change anytime soon. So we really have to rethink as a world how we manufacture and use goods. So we have a goal by 2020 to collect 2 billion pounds of electronics. Globally right now we're at 1.4 billion pounds. And just with the Reconnect program, since we launched that in 2004, we've collected 427 million pounds. We're the largest recycler globally, geographically, in 78 countries and territories. So we take it very seriously. If you think about it, and you see those pictures of the e-waste, and you see a box that says Dell, that's our owner's name. We don't want that in any landfill. Because we'd seen all of the e-waste that was being dumped overseas. Dell took a leadership position to really push for the banning of e-waste export internationally from the United States.
The problem with recycling is that on its own, it is not a solution. The process is complex and expensive, and lots of valuable material is still lost. To reduce the amount of e-waste, we need to rethink how we design and manufacture our technology.
I really believe that the current linear take, make, dispose economy is a model that's no longer fit for purpose. We make most of the electronics around us today in a predominantly linear fashion. We've set this up in the Industrial Revolution, and it's a very efficient process. We get a lot of very high quality electronics at quite an affordable price, really. But no consideration has been paid into what happens to the products at the end of its life. So these products can rarely be fixed or repaired or remanufactured, which are kind of key components to moving towards a more circular model. We define the circular economy as an economy that is restorative and regenerative by design.
Products are being manufactured and optimized for the purchasing decision. And when people go and they look to buy things, we're comparing features. We're not comparing lifespan. There's a path for manufacturers to create products that are compelling, that are useful, that push the state of technology forward, that also can stand the test of time. So if we're going to talk about a circular economy in the context of electronics, it has to be around repair and reuse. That's an area, if we can extend the life of a product, we can build a circular economy. But we really need to de-emphasize recycling, because recycling is the least important part of the loop. We've been so frustrated with the state of the industry and with manufacturers' complete unwillingness to solve this themselves that we said, okay, if you won't design a solution, we'll design the solution for you. And we're going to open source your hardware to you. We're going to take your products, we're going to open them up, we're going to show people how to take them apart, whether you like it or not. So when a new product comes out, we get our hands on it, we take it apart, we figure out what the process is to repair it, and then we start writing repair instructions. I have an Apple Watch here, and in this case it was really challenging to figure out how to take it apart because there's glass, and we had to actually use heat and an X-Acto knife to cut a gasket around the edge of it and get inside. And one of the things that we find when we get inside is buried deep in the bowels of the Apple Watch is the battery. If there wasn't the battery in here and you wanted to go to recycle this, you could just throw the whole thing in the shredder. You could take the watch band off and throw the rest of it into the shredder. But the battery causes a safety problem because if there's any charge in this and you run it through a shredder, it will ignite the dust that's in the shredder and it can cause an explosion. And no recycler can spend 5 minutes worth of their paid laborers to get the battery out of a watch that maybe has 50 cents in raw material value.
You need to create a different reality than we have right now to be able to solve all the problems. So why focus on all the problems? Well, we focus on the problems in our own supply chain to create change throughout the whole industry. And how do you do that? By creating a different kind of thinking. And in that sense, Fairphone is part of a bigger thing, I think. So we've been very successful in the sense that when we started, we were just, we were set up as a campaign. But at a certain point, we figured out, to really be able to change, we need to be part of the economic system. And that's also the moment where we said, you know, if there's more than 5,000 people that will buy the phone, we're going to do it. And the fantastic thing that happened then in the crowdfunding was that we sold over 10,000 phones in 3 weeks. And just to give you some numbers, that's 3.5 million euros of crowdfunding in just 3 weeks. And we had it on our bank account. We didn't know how to make a phone. That was a bit of a panic situation, but you know, we saw that people really made that statement.
The mission of Fairphone as a social enterprise is by building our phone, we want to create a more fair economy. A fair economy, that's a huge word, that's so intangible, you cannot really overnight change the whole economic system. So what we've done is within our own value chain, we have identified 4 action areas that we continuously want to improve on a social and environmental aspect. Those 4 areas being mining, design, manufacturing and life cycle. For example, in mining, and the first priority in there is how to come up with alternatives for the currently infamous conflict minerals, being tin, tantalum, tungsten and gold from Congo and surrounding countries. So by investing and sourcing from mines that are validated conflict-free, we hope to come up with alternatives for Congolese miners to be able to work in these validated green mines instead of working in mines that are run by rebel groups.
One of the main flaws of the design of smartphones now is that they are designed to be very beautiful in the shop, but not so designed to, let's say, survive the life that we give them. So we try to solve that with this integrated case, which gives a much better resistance as well. Another flaw on phones normally is that we'll break our screens, and normally we have to go to a shop or lose it for a couple of days. With Fairphone 2, we have 2 pins here that you can open, and you can just remove the screen. What we've done with Fairphone 2 design is isolate all the electromechanical components. And what that means is all the components in electronics that have a movement, if you want. So a camera has a focus that has to focus. A speaker has to vibrate. A USB port has a connector coming in and out every day. So all those electromechanical components are the ones that break faster, let's say. For instance, if my camera would have a problem, then after some diagnosis has been done, I could just get a new camera, and with a simple Phillips screw, you would be able to just remove your camera.
In a couple of years' time, I'm almost 100% sure that the main industry has a lot of these notions of circular economy integrated in their product management, product design, product services, and product end-of-life management.
Technology is changing our society faster than ever before. The rate we build and consume sets new records every year. And as a result, the amount we throw away is also increasing. There are growing numbers of sites where waste electronics are processed unsafely, with dangerous consequences. And ΑΝΑΚΥΚΛΩΣΗ is just one example. It is time to think of a different way. A way for consumers to guarantee their e-waste doesn't end up in places like ΑΝΑΚΥΚΛΩΣΗ. We need manufacturers and designers to supply products that last. We need a solution.
We are not really discussing circular economy because we just found one motherboard lying there. Why do we leave it here? Why do we pollute these children with such things when we can use them properly and put them back into the product chain? Is it deliberate or somebody is not thinking?
I think somebody's not caring, but...
Well, then we must begin to care because we are in a global village. You see, it is not a Ghanaian issue, please. This is not about ΑΝΑΚΥΚΛΩΣΗ. It is not even about Ghana. It's about how we are treating our end-of-life equipment. That is the fundamental issue. If we look at it as Agbogbloshie issue, if we look at it as, oh, Ghana is polluted, we put fantastic pictures in the newspapers, on the internet, and say, oh, Ghana is polluted, please. It is not about Ghana. It's about how, as a global system, we are looking at material scarcity, material conservation. The future of this globe depends on how we all transform this place and make it better so that the materials can come back into the production chain. Otherwise, the next generation will not survive what we are doing. This is certainly not sustainable.